Millionaire brings pregnant mistress to church service, shocked but receives public shame. Welcome to a story of wealth, scandal, and startling revelations. In this unfolding drama, a respected millionaire arrives at a grand church service with someone he never should have brought along, his pregnant mistress. The stunned congregation can hardly believe what they witness, but the truly unexpected unfolds when a whirlwind of suspicion, shattered loyalty, and hidden agendas explodes into public shame. Prepare for scandalous encounters, uneasy alliances, and plenty of spine-tingling twists around every corner. As you join us on this journey, brace yourself for betrayal, redemption, and the ultimate karmic retribution. No one can predict how this will end. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Franklin Rourke was known in his city for two distinct qualities: his almost unnerving generosity and his unwavering love for spectacle. Everyone who encountered him, neighbors, business partners, or casual acquaintances, agreed that this combination was potent. Rumors thrived around him like vines, sprouting fresh gossip daily. On a certain Sunday morning, he decided to upend the usual hum of church routine by arriving with someone nobody could have predicted: a radiant woman named Marina, clearly pregnant. The place was Trinity Church, an elegant stone cathedral that towered in its historic district and boasted stained glass windows depicting biblical stories. Worshippers arrived, wearing their Sunday best, anticipating a regular sermon by Reverend Clarence. Instead, they found themselves stunned at the sight of Franklin stepping from his Bentley, lovingly assisting his visibly expectant companion. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. The hush that settled over the congregation carried both awe and deep-seated disapproval. What ignited immediate speculation wasn't just Marina's presence. Everyone in town believed Franklin to be a happily married man to the poised and genteel Lucille Rourke. Lucille was known for her philanthropic endeavors, spearheading charity galas, donating to local shelters, and gracefully running auctions for medical research. There was no sign of Lucille at his side this morning, and instead, the newcomer clutched Franklin's arm with a familiarity that raised eyebrows. Dressed in a form-fitting black dress that accentuated her growing belly, Marina seemed equally aware of every curious glance. Yet, her confidence did not waver. Franklin, on the other hand, wore an unwavering smile, greeting acquaintances and church elders as if parading a prized trophy. Some watchers silently mulled over whether she was a surrogate or perhaps a cousin, but deep down, they already sensed the truth that this was Franklin's mistress. Whispers and scandalous theories erupted like a brush fire. Inside the vaulted church, the organ's low notes filled the stony air. Rays of colored light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting blues and reds across the pews. Though the organ played the usual hymns, people's attention remained riveted on Franklin and Marina. They seated themselves in the front pew, long designated for Franklin and Lucille due to his generous donations that had renovated the church's roof, replaced worn pews, and even funded the gilded crucifix above the altar. Even Reverend Clarence, usually steady and composed, momentarily faltered as he glanced toward them. The hush in the church grew so profound that one could hear the flick of a hymnal page or the squeak of a shoe against the polished floor. Franklin, ignoring the weight of the moment, reached for Marina's hand in a gesture of comfort, only fueling the gossip. How did he expect this to be received, especially in such a sacred place? Reverend Clarence stepped to the pulpit, cleared his throat, and began the service with the usual greetings. But the routine was overshadowed by a tidal wave of speculation. Everyone struggled to focus on the gospel reading. Even the words of the prayer seemed to float by. Some worshippers dared to cast sympathetic gazes, assuming the unthinkable truth that Lucille must have discovered her husband's betrayal, or perhaps she remained in blissful ignorance. Marina noticed it all. She felt every judgmental glance, every stunned look, yet she maintained an air of cool composure, her posture poised, her eyes radiating an odd pride. Franklin, meanwhile, looked smug, as though daring anyone to openly challenge him. During the sermon, the question burned in many minds: was Franklin so arrogant as to flaunt his affair in the house of God itself? It wouldn't be long before their assumptions confronted reality in the most unexpected way possible. When the final hymn ended, people immediately began to gather in small clusters, whispering animatedly. Some watchers approached the pair out of morbid curiosity. Franklin, ever the showman, greeted them with casual warmth, but his usual hearty laugh seemed more forced than genuine. Every handshake came with a question disguised behind polite small talk. Marina, standing by his side, delivered polite nods, an occasional half-smile, and even dared to rub her belly gently, an intimate gesture that made tongues wag even faster. One of the senior deacons, a woman named Beatrice Fowler, stepped forward with trembling hands, her silver hair quivering. She leaned in closely to Franklin, her voice brimming with concern. "Where's Lucille?" she asked plainly. Franklin froze for an instant, but swiftly replied, "She's feeling under the weather, dear Beatrice." Without flinching, he continued, "Marina came to support me today. Little did anyone know how this day would unfold." Outside, the brilliant summer sun clashed with the tense atmosphere. Usually, families would remain for fellowship in the church courtyard, chatting or sharing homemade treats. But this time, people watched Franklin and Marina like hawks. A swirl of hushed rumors circulated. "He's left Lucille. That child is his. Has Lucille known all along?" Marina, quiet as she was, strolled around as though she belonged, blinking back the harsh sunlight and greeting people with a gentle nod. She didn't flinch even when a small child stared openly at her swollen belly. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the church entrance. Lucille Rourke, flanked by two close friends, stepped onto the courtyard's smooth stones. Heads turned so sharply it was a wonder no one sprained their neck. Clad in an elegant pastel dress, Lucille looked pale but determined. Her appearance sent a ripple of shock, for nobody had expected her to show up unannounced. All eyes zeroed in on Lucille, the wife who everyone assumed was absent. She held herself with a refined dignity that belied her inner turmoil. That morning, her good friend Harriet Finch had telephoned, a trembling whisper in her voice, to warn her that Franklin arrived at church with another woman. Lucille had refused to believe it at first, attributing Harriet's words to some misunderstanding. But one glance across the courtyard confirmed the devastating truth. There was her husband, wearing his tailored suit, standing with a young, pregnant woman. The shock was momentarily paralyzing. Her world seemed to tilt on its axis. Yet she refused to crumble in public. Summoning every ounce of composure, Lucille stepped forward. Her presence was like a thunderbolt across the open space. People parted quietly, forming a silent corridor. Franklin's face twitched, as though he'd been caught in a carefully orchestrated lie. Next, all illusions would shatter. "Franklin," Lucille said, her voice echoing across the hushed courtyard. She kept her chin up, heart pounding against her ribcage, determined not to shed a tear. Marina stood slightly behind Franklin, eyes flickering with an emotion nobody could quite read. Was it fear or defiance? Franklin made an awkward gesture, as if to smooth his hair, buying time. Then he attempted to grin, as though willing the tension away. "Lucille, my dear," he began. "I was about to." She cut him off. "Introduce me to her?" She nodded toward Marina. The question hung in the air, a flaming arrow. Everyone braced themselves, sensing the meltdown that was about to unfold. Rather than cowering, Marina stepped forward. She extended her hand to Lucille, defiance glittering in her eyes. In that moment, the entire congregation fell silent, torn between horror and morbid curiosity at the scene unraveling before them. Lucille refused the handshake, not out of malice, but because her nerves were frayed. She could feel the prying eyes of half the church members on her, devouring every detail of her reaction. "I see you've decided to come here with my husband," she said quietly, forcing an even tone. "That's quite a statement." Marina didn't waver. "I'm carrying Franklin's child," she replied calmly, making the courtyard gasp. Some stifled their cries behind hands, while a few older members shook their heads disapprovingly. Lucille's face paled. Though she had suspected an affair, hearing the confirmation so bluntly shattered her composure. The congregation seemed almost collectively to hold its breath. Franklin looked between the two women, his face tightening. Then, in a move that left every witness speechless, he placed a supportive hand on Marina's shoulder. "We should discuss this in private," he murmured, but the stage had already been set for a public reckoning. At that precise moment, Reverend Clarence emerged from the church, still in his pastoral robes. Upon seeing the tense standoff, he rushed forward, hoping to diffuse the conflict. "Let's step inside," he urged gently. "We can settle this away from so many onlookers." Franklin nodded, relief trickling across his features. Lucille, though filled with fury, understood the wisdom of avoiding further spectacle in front of the entire congregation. Even Marina gave a curt nod. Yet, as they began moving to the church's small side chamber, used for counseling sessions and storage, an unanticipated wave of onlookers trailed them, unashamedly eager for the next act. The side room was cramped, cluttered with folding chairs and extra hymnals. Despite Reverend Clarence's request that they speak privately, at least a dozen people hovered outside the slightly ajar door, eavesdropping. They couldn't tear themselves away from what felt like a live, dramatic performance of biblical proportions. Inside the modest chamber, Reverend Clarence attempted to reassert control. "Franklin, Lucille, Marina," he began, voice steady but urgent. "We are in God's house. Let's address this matter respectfully." The tension was suffocating. Franklin paced the cramped space, repeatedly running a hand over his slicked back hair. Marina leaned against a table, arms folded, seemingly unconcerned about the disapproval swirling around her. Lucille clutched her small clutch purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Pastor," Lucille finally said, "I appreciate your desire for decorum, but I believe everyone deserves an explanation." "I certainly do." Her voice wavered, but her eyes flashed with anger. Franklin opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck, forming a thick lump in his throat. He was known for his poised public persona, yet now he stammered. Never had the cracks in his carefully curated facade been so visible. The silence pulsed, waiting for the confession to spill out. Marina stepped forward, refusing to let Franklin flounder alone. "I'll speak," she said. Her voice was surprisingly soft, even though the ramifications of her words would be anything but gentle. "Yes, I'm pregnant with Franklin's child. This wasn't planned, but here we are." Her gaze roved from Lucille to the pastor. "And no, I'm not just some fling. I've been by his side for months now, through business trips and personal struggles. You might want to call me a mistress, but the truth is, Franklin and we care about each other." Lucille's hands trembled. She felt a piercing betrayal, yet also confusion. If Franklin cared about Marina, why had he never spoken a word at home? Why parade her in church this way? In that cramped room, illusions crumbled like ancient walls struck by a sudden quake, and the audience outside listened intently, hungry for every detail. "Months?" Lucille echoed, eyes brimming with tears. She imagined late nights when Franklin claimed he was stuck at the office or the times he left on weekend conferences. She had assumed his philanthropic dealings demanded his time, but her illusions were now shattered. The heartbreak was swift and merciless. Franklin finally found his voice. "Lucille, I never intended it to go this far," he said. He paused, searching for an explanation that might salvage even a scrap of his dignity. "I felt lonely," he confessed. "You were so busy." One found comfort in Marina. Reverend Clarence bowed his head, eyes closed as though praying for guidance. The weight of the confession pressed heavily on everyone. Outside the door, gasps and faint murmurs ricocheted among the eavesdroppers. Lucille swallowed hard. A mix of rage and regret churned in her gut. "Then you bring her here? Of all places?" she whispered, voice trembling with despair. The silence that followed Lucille's words was as cutting as broken glass. Marina's expression flickered. Perhaps she realized, for the first time, the public nature of this humiliation. Before she could respond, a sudden interruption rattled the tension. Harriet Finch, Lucille's friend, burst in from the hallway. "Lucille, are you all right?" Harriet asked, ignoring the pastor's attempts at decorum. Her eyes swept from Lucille's stricken face to Franklin's tense posture and finally landed on Marina. A wave of revulsion passed over Harriet's features. "This is unacceptable," she hissed, her voice trembling with moral indignation. Marina's lips curled into something resembling a sneer. "Is it unacceptable for two people who care about each other to pursue happiness?" she asked pointedly. Harriet, normally self-restrained, nearly spat her response. "You pursued it at the expense of a marriage, and you chose to flaunt it in a place of worship." A new layer of tension coiled in the cramped room. Sensing the confrontation escalating, Reverend Clarence raised his palms. "This conflict has no place in the midst of so many bystanders," he said, voice pitched in calm but firm authority. "Let's at least clear the crowd and address this as adults." Outside, curious onlookers parted like waves as the pastor ushered Franklin, Lucille, and Marina toward a private office deeper in the church. Harriet followed closely, refusing to leave Lucille's side. The office was marginally larger, but still cozy, with walls lined in well-worn theological texts and a single stained glass window depicting an angelic scene. Once seated, Franklin fidgeted with his Rolex watch, a clear giveaway of his anxiety. Lucille drew a shaky breath. "We can't simply pretend this didn't happen," she began. "Franklin, how can you justify bringing her here?" He lowered his gaze. "Because I believed we could find forgiveness and understanding. I hope to normalize our new reality." His words landed like a punch to Lucille's chest. "New reality," she repeated. "Do you truly think this can be normal for me? For us?" She gestured to herself and then to Marina's rounded belly. The betrayal stung, and the casual way Franklin described it only deepened her wound. Her entire life had been built around a partnership with Franklin, from the charitable events they planned to the everyday routines of sharing coffee in the morning. Marina abruptly interjected. "I'm not asking for permission," she declared. "I'm having this child, and Franklin supports me. Whether you accept it or not is up to you, but I won't allow anyone to shame me." Reverend Clarence looked pained, torn between moral indignation and pastoral duty. "I remind you both," he said, "marriage is a sacred vow. We must consider its sanctity before forging forward with something that so clearly breaks hearts and trust." A knock at the door revealed Deacon Beatrice, her expression anxious. Word had spread, and the entire congregation was now abuzz. "Reverend, we have a situation," she said. "Some of the members are already sharing this on social media. People outside the church are posting photos of Franklin and the young woman." The older lady's voice shook, mixing sorrow and frustration. "We can't contain this scandal." Franklin buried his face in his hands. His carefully polished public image was cracking like a facade hammered by relentless storms. Meanwhile, Lucille realized with a cold sense of dread that this wasn't just personal betrayal. It was about to become a spectacle. In the modern world, once gossip hits the internet, it becomes unstoppable. Harriet placed a reassuring hand on Lucille's shoulder. "We'll face it," she said softly. "But you need to protect yourself." The million-dollar question lingered. How far would Franklin go to keep his secrets hidden? The Reverend excused himself to address the gathering crowd, leaving the four alone. For a long moment, no one spoke. Franklin cleared his throat. "Lucille," he began softly, "I never meant to break you. I was lost, and Marina was there. Things happened." Lucille, tears threatening to overflow, retorted, "But you paraded her here, in our sacred place." "It's as if you wanted everyone to see." Marina lifted her chin in defense. "He brought me because we shouldn't have to hide anymore. You might see it as a spectacle, but for us, it's simply the truth." Harriet scowled. "A truth that hurts everyone," she snapped. The sound of murmuring voices outside the office door underscored the tension. Franklin sighed heavily, standing up to pace. "We need to go home and talk," he suggested, glancing uncertainly at Lucille. But she remained cold, her arms folded around the heartbreak pulsing in her chest. Before anyone could respond, a voice called from outside, loud enough to carry through the door. "Is Lucille in there?" "Mrs. Rourke, are you okay?" The tension soared. It was one of the church's youth mentors, a woman known for her protective nature toward Lucille's community efforts. Lucille's philanthropic projects often involved local teens, and her kindness was legendary. The entire congregation looked up to her. Seeing her betrayed felt like a personal affront to many. Marina's lips curled in annoyance. "They treat her like some princess," she muttered under her breath. Lucille caught the remark and fixed her with a sharp glare. "I've only tried to do good in this community," Lucille said firmly. "I never asked for a pedestal, and I never asked for this chaos." Marina shrugged. "Life happens. We can't help who we love, can we?" Franklin placed his hand gently on Marina's shoulder again, but said nothing. "You speak of love," Lucille challenged, eyes hard. "But what about honesty, respect, vows?" Her voice cracked on that last word. Harriet squeezed Lucille's hand. For Lucille, love had always been about building a life, not tearing one apart. Marina's brand of love felt like a destructive storm. Franklin's face contorted in regret. "Lucille," he began, voice raw, "please, I'm sorry. I lost myself somewhere along the line. My business expansions, the late nights. I was searching for something." Harriet rose abruptly, crossing the room to stand between Lucille and Franklin. "What you were searching for should never have led you to hurt Lucille like this," Harriet exclaimed. "And dragging it into the open at church. This is unspeakable." An uneasy silence fell. Suddenly, Lucille stood. "I can't do this here." She brushed past Franklin toward the door. "I won't be part of your spectacle. If you want to flaunt your shame, do it without me." Leaving the office, Lucille found the hallway crowded with members pretending not to be eavesdropping. Her tear-streaked face and trembling posture spoke volumes. Some tried to offer comforting words, but she hurried past them, Harriet in tow. Outside, the sunlight felt harsh, almost accusatory. Lucille slipped into her car, a silver Mercedes she had once regarded with pride. Now it felt like a stifling cage. Harriet took the passenger seat, gently shutting the door behind her. "We'll go to my home," Harriet suggested. "You can rest. Then we'll figure out what to do." Lucille nodded, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. Back inside, Marina and Franklin emerged a few minutes later to a crowd that stared at them with a mix of shock and disapproval. For once, Franklin was at a loss for words. He helped Marina into his Bentley, feeling the weight of the congregation's judging eyes. The showman was unraveling under the spotlight of his own making. As Franklin guided the Bentley through winding streets, he glanced repeatedly at Marina, whose composure never cracked. She stared out the window, ignoring the stares from pedestrians who recognized the car. The hush inside the vehicle was suffocating. "I'm sorry," he finally muttered. Marina turned to him, her voice low. "Sorry for what exactly?" she asked. For hurting Lucille or for parading me around? Because, to be honest, I never asked to come to church. You insisted. Franklin exhaled shakily. I wanted us to be honest, he replied, though the conviction in his words seemed hollow. Marina studied his profile, observing the tension in his jaw. She realized he was caught in a trap of his own design, uncertain which side to cling to, his marriage or his new relationship. The swirling storm of gossip, social media backlash, and moral condemnation had only just begun. Meanwhile, at Harriet's home, a modest, cozy bungalow, adorned with pictures of family and well-loved potted plants, Lucille sat on a floral patterned sofa, trying to calm her ragged breathing. The betrayal rattled her to the core. Memories flooded her mind. Their wedding day, the honeymoon in Paris, where Franklin had gifted her a necklace from Cartier, the countless charity events they'd hosted to better their community. Harriet gently offered her a cup of chamomile tea. I can't believe he did this, Harriet murmured. He's made you the talk of the entire city. And that woman, how brazen she was. Lucille took a trembling sip. This is all so public, she whispered. I can handle heartbreak, but the shame, the gossip, it's unbearable. Harriet wrapped an arm around her friend's shoulders. You're not alone. We'll get through this. But first, you need to decide what you truly want, because Franklin has forced your hand. At that same moment, across town, Franklin pulled up to a gated residence, a sleek, modern mansion he'd secretly purchased in his name alone. Marina raised an eyebrow. This is where you wanted us to go? Her tone was guarded. He nodded, punching in a code to open the gate. The property boasted manicured lawns, angular architecture, and floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Marina had visited before, but only a handful of times. This place felt more like a luxury fortress than a home. Inside, the minimalistic furniture gleamed under recessed lighting. A faint echo followed their footsteps across marble floors. Franklin set down his keys with a weary sigh. Stay here for now, he said, glancing at Marina's growing belly. It's better than dealing with the media or the church crowd. She folded her arms, a question burning in her eyes. Where does this leave us? Is it truly me you want, or just an escape? Franklin's shoulders slumped, and he sank onto a white leather sofa. I don't have all the answers, he admitted. I never meant for things to spiral like this. He could still picture Lucille's heartbreak, the shock on the faces of the congregation. He also saw Marina's unwavering stance, her quiet defiance in the face of public outrage. Torn between guilt and desire, he felt paralyzed. Marina stood across from him, eyes searching. I need to know if I made a mistake giving my heart to you, she said, pressing a protective hand on her belly. Because if you're only half in this, then I need to plan my future alone. A heavy pause followed. Finally, Franklin forced himself to speak. I want to be there for our child, he said softly. I just need time to sort everything out. But time was a luxury slipping through his fingers. News of the scandal spread faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, local tabloids and gossip websites were ablaze with headlines such as Millionaire Franklin Rourke flaunts pregnant mistress in House of God and charity queen Lucille Rourke. Humiliated, shocking church scene. Photos from the Sunday spectacle went viral, capturing Lucille's anguished face and Marina's visible pregnancy. Even mainstream media outlets began picking up the story, hungry for sensational drama. In Lucille's circle of wealthy acquaintances, phones rang incessantly with demands for more details. Some expressed genuine sympathy, others couldn't resist the schadenfreude. Lucille felt trapped in the center of a scandal she had never asked for, grappling with rage and sorrow. Meanwhile, Franklin found himself bombarded by reporters and faced a looming crisis at his company. Several major investors threatened to withdraw, citing concerns about moral integrity and the negative press swirling around their star businessman. Unbeknownst to Franklin, however, the real meltdown was already brewing within his corporate empire. His CFO, a sharp-eyed and morally conservative man named Gavin Pearce, had spent the better part of Monday fielding calls from concerned stakeholders. Reputational damage, they kept repeating. We invested in a man of decency, not a tabloid figure. Gavin was fiercely loyal to the business, but not necessarily to Franklin as a person. He believed in upholding the company's spotless record. The scandal endangered them all. As he reviewed finances that day, he uncovered unsettling irregularities in certain accounts, offshore wire transfers made under Franklin's authorization. Startled, Gavin decided to dig deeper. If Franklin's personal life was unraveled, it was possible his business decisions might be equally compromised. Gavin sensed a bigger story behind those suspicious transactions, a story that threatened to blow up bigger than the scandal at church. Meanwhile, Harriet convinced Lucille to contact an attorney. "He's humiliated you publicly," Harriet reasoned. "At the very least, you deserve legal advice." Lucille agreed, albeit reluctantly. She'd never imagined divorce, but the harsh reality of Franklin's betrayal loomed large. That afternoon, she visited a law firm downtown. Behind tinted glass doors and neutral-toned walls, Lucille found herself in an elegantly furnished office, sitting across from a formidable attorney named Marianne Fletcher. Marianne, known for handling high-profile marital disputes, listened calmly as Lucille recounted the events of Sunday. "This is more than just infidelity," Marianne stated firmly. "He's caused significant emotional distress and tarnished your public reputation. If you choose to proceed, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and emotional cruelty." Lucille gripped the arms of her chair, uncertain. She still wrestled with a twisted sense of loyalty to Franklin, but the sting of betrayal pushed her closer towards self-preservation. That evening, Lucille returned home to the sprawling estate she and Franklin shared for over a decade. Memories whispered from every corner, the grand foyer where they danced at their 10th anniversary, the formal dining room that hosted countless charity dinners, even the library stacked with first-edition classics. Franklin had gifted her. Each recollection stabbed at her heart. She had anticipated confronting Franklin there, but the house was silent. The staff, clearly uncomfortable, offered no explanation, only that Mr. Rourke had not returned since Sunday. Lucille retreated to her bedroom, closed the door, and let the tears flow. Her shattered illusions weighed upon her like a suffocating blanket. In the hush of night, her phone buzzed. A single message from Harriet lit the screen. "We're all behind you. Stay strong." Lucille stared at it, tears slipping down her cheeks. She realized she stood at a crossroads. Strength might be her only option now. At his hidden mansion, Franklin paced beneath the vaulted ceiling. Marina had retired upstairs, exhausted from the day's emotional turmoil. But Franklin's phone rang incessantly, calls from his PR team, from Gavin, from outraged business partners. Each conversation left him drained, forced to confront the scale of the damage. The final straw came when his largest investor, Carrington Holdings, threatened to cut ties if he didn't handle the scandal swiftly. Desperate, Franklin dialed Lucille. The line rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again, still no answer. A wave of regret and fear surged within him. For years he believed his wealth and influence could smooth over any personal misstep. But seeing the avalanche of consequences, he understood he might be losing everything. The phone buzzed again, this time from Gavin. With a heavy sigh, Franklin answered, unaware that what Gavin had discovered would shake his world further. "Franklin," Gavin said, voice tight, "I've stumbled onto something we need to discuss. The investors are skittish, but this goes beyond bad PR. Can you come to the office tomorrow morning?" Franklin's stomach lurched. "Tell me now," he insisted, pressing the phone to his ear. Gavin hesitated. "It's regarding the offshore transfers." Large sums authorized by you, but the details are murky, unofficial recipients, questionable shells. It could be considered money laundering if we don't clarify it. We need answers, or we risk a full-blown investigation. Franklin's pulse pounded, cold sweat coating his palms. He remembered signing documents, trusting certain associates who promised lucrative returns. Had he walked into a financial trap? "I'll be there," he managed, voice trembling. The call ended. Exhausted, he slumped onto the sofa. Between the scandal at church and these startling revelations, Franklin realized with a chill that he stood on the brink of ruin. The next morning, Lucille woke from a fitful sleep, resolved to finally speak with Franklin. Despite everything, she needed answers and closure. She showered, dressed in a simple navy blue blouse and slacks, and pulled her hair into a low chignon. Instead of sadness, a fierce determination sparked within her. She sent Harriet a brief text. "I'm confronting him. Wish me courage." Then she drove to Franklin's downtown office, a towering glass building that bore the Rourke name in bold letters. Upon entering, the hushed stares from staff told her the scandal had deeply penetrated the workplace. Undeterred, she headed for Franklin's top-floor suite. At the reception desk, a nervous assistant rose. "Mrs. Rourke," she began politely. "Mr. Rourke is in a meeting." Lucille merely lifted her chin. "Then I'll wait in his office," she said, stepping past the assistant. Today, she wasn't seeking permission. Inside Franklin's office, luxurious and modern, with a panoramic view of the city, Lucille found a seat and took a moment to gather her thoughts. This was where he orchestrated deals, entertained foreign clients, and signed multi-million-dollar contracts. It felt strangely hollow now. The polished oak desk, the plush carpet, the art pieces by famous painters, all seemed like props of a life built on illusions. Minutes later, the door swung open. Franklin entered, looking haggard. He froze at the sight of her. "Lucille," he breathed. "I didn't expect you here." Gavin Pierce followed behind him, brows knitted in worry. Lucille stood. "I want to talk," she said simply, noticing the tension between Franklin and Gavin. She also spotted a folder tucked under Gavin's arm. Something told her that Franklin's troubles were more than just marital. Judging by the grim look on Gavin's face, it was indeed something serious. Without preamble, Gavin said, "I'll wait outside so you two can speak privately." He left, closing the door softly. Franklin sank into his high-backed chair, exhaling shakily. "Lucille," he began, "I'm sorry. You must believe me. I never meant to hurt you like this. That was never my intention." She folded her arms. "And yet you did. You've humiliated me, yourself, and our church. The entire town is talking." Her voice trembled, but she kept her composure. "I need to know why bring Marina to the service? Why not spare me this public fiasco?" He swallowed. Part of me wanted to force the truth out. I was drowning in secrets. I felt guilty, and I thought, maybe if it was out in the open we could start fresh. I was wrong, and now I'm paying the price. Lucille's voice hardened. "So am I, Franklin, but I won't keep paying forever." Franklin laced his fingers, gaze downcast. "I can't ask you to forgive me right now," he murmured. "But I want you to know I still care about you. We built so much together." Lucille's eyes shone with unshed tears. "We did, yes, but you've shattered my trust." She paused, breath trembling. "I met with an attorney." She watched his reaction, reading every flicker across his face. A flash of panic gripped him. "You want a divorce?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I can't see another path." "Unless you can give me a reason to stay." Franklin's shoulders slumped. "I don't want to lose you, but I also have a responsibility to the child Marina is carrying." Bitterness flooded Lucille. "It's not just the child. You chose her." She struggled to remain calm. "I came here hoping for something, an explanation, maybe closure, but I still feel lost." At that precise moment, Gavin tapped lightly on the door. Franklin called him in, relief crossing his features at the temporary distraction. Gavin walked in, wearing a grave expression. He handed over the folder. "Franklin, we need immediate clarification on these accounts," Gavin said. "If we don't rectify this, the authorities could get involved." He turned to Lucille politely. "I'm sorry to intrude on personal matters, Mrs. Rourke, but this is urgent." Lucille, though reeling from heartbreak, recognized the seriousness in Gavin's tone. She watched as Franklin flipped through documents, his face blanching with each page. Offshore wire transfers, suspicious recipients' words that spelled potential legal nightmares. Lucille felt a swirl of emotions, betrayal, worry, and an odd sense of pity. Franklin placed the folder down with a shaking hand. "So you're telling me we could be investigated for fraud if we can't prove these transactions were legitimate?" Gavin nodded solemnly. "Yes," Gavin confirmed. "And if our major investors catch wind of this, they'll pull out faster than we can blink. We'll be ruined. We need a strategy fast." Anxiety crackled in the air. Lucille, despite her personal turmoil, realized the gravity. She might be divorcing Franklin, but their finances were deeply entangled. Their philanthropic ventures, the companies, the charities, they were all linked. A public downfall of Franklin's empire would have catastrophic ripple effects, including on charities she herself cared about deeply. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Franklin mumbled, "I don't even recall signing off on some of these. My associates assured me they were strategic investments. I never expected anything illegal." Gavin leveled a long stare at him. "Whether you expected it or not, the burden falls on you to fix it." Then he turned to Lucille. "Ma'am, I'm aware of your personal situation, but we need your help too." "My help?" Lucille echoed, uncertain. She wasn't a stranger to the workings of Franklin's empire. He often relied on her for philanthropic strategies, dealing with public relations, and occasionally bridging negotiations with her impeccable social grace. But diving into murky financial waters felt daunting, especially now. Gavin nodded. "You have a unique position in the public eye, particularly among philanthropic circles. If you can reassure certain investors or philanthropic partners that everything is under control, despite the personal scandal, we might keep them from fleeing." Lucille hesitated, a whirlwind of conflicting feelings pounding in her chest. Why should she help Franklin after his betrayal? Yet, she also understood that if the company collapsed, hundreds of employees and multiple charities dependent on their funding would suffer. A sense of duty clashed with her pain. Finally, she swallowed hard and said, "I'll consider it, but don't expect me to clean up all his messes." A tense alliance formed that day. Lucille, though on the brink of leaving Franklin, agreed to assist in stabilizing the business. In exchange, she demanded full transparency, both financial and personal. "No more secrets," she declared. Franklin, cornered and desperate, consented. A flurry of strategy meetings followed. Meanwhile, Marina, isolated at Franklin's hidden mansion, felt increasingly restless. She scrolled through countless online articles, reading vicious comments labeling her a gold digger, home wrecker, and worse. Though she tried to shrug it off, the negativity pressed on her psyche. She realized she hadn't seen Franklin in days, only receiving brief phone calls or texts apologizing for his absence. Frustration grew. She was pregnant, lonely and uncertain about her future as the city's spotlight tore her apart. One morning, she decided to take control. She summoned a high-profile journalist she knew from past events to share her side of the story, unbeknownst to Franklin. At a quiet cafe near the river, Marina sat across from a journalist named Chelsea Thompson. Chelsea was known for her hard-hitting interviews and knack for spinning controversies into compelling stories. Marina sipped her coffee, ignoring the curious glances from patrons who recognized her as that mistress. "Thank you for meeting me," Marina began, voice subdued. "I'm tired of being labeled. I want people to know the truth." Chelsea leaned forward. "Which is?" she asked, pen at the ready. Marina exhaled. "That Franklin and I fell in love under complicated circumstances. It wasn't about money. I had my own small business. I didn't enter this affair to break up a marriage. And now, with a child on the way, I'm being vilified." As Chelsea scribbled notes, the wheels in her journalist mind turned. A new angle on the scandal formed, one that could change the public's perspective yet again. The ensuing article, published on a popular online platform, bore the headline, "Pregnant Mistress Speaks Out, My Truth About the Rourke Affair." Within hours, it trended across social media. Marina's words were unfiltered, painting herself as a woman who fell for Franklin's charm and generosity, claiming he had promised her a real future. She admitted she felt guilty for causing Lucille pain, but insisted, "Love doesn't wait for perfect timing or perfect morality." Lucille read the article late at night, her stomach churning. Part of her felt scorn that Marina dared present herself as a tragic romantic. Another part of her acknowledged the complexity. Perhaps Franklin had indeed led Marina to believe there was a place for her in his life. The scandal's narrative shifted once again, fueling fresh debates and renewed media interest. The stakes climbed ever higher, pulling each key player deeper into the storm. As the corporate crisis mounted and the scandal spiraled, Lucille and Franklin found themselves bound in a reluctant partnership to salvage the company. By day, they strategized with Gavin and lawyers, navigating labyrinthine financial reviews, reassuring stakeholders, and patching holes in a sinking ship. By night, Lucille retreated to Harriet's place, refusing to stay in the same home as Franklin. Days turned into weeks. Karmic ripples swelled around Franklin. The scandal cost him endorsements, deals, and the respect of former allies. The media painted him as a man undone by vanity and infidelity. Meanwhile, Lucille's dignified composure in public interviews earned her sympathy and admiration. Investors who once looked up to Franklin now placed their trust in Lucille's integrity. Marina remained a wild card. She publicly portrayed herself as sympathetic, but privately simmered with bitterness over the negative attention. She wanted Franklin to openly claim her, to finalize a future that felt increasingly uncertain. Then came the day of the investors' conference, a pivotal moment that would decide the company's fate. The largest shareholders gathered in a grand ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, the real-life iconic hotel known for high-stakes corporate events. Franklin was to give a presentation on the company's direction, proving that recent controversies wouldn't sink the enterprise. Lucille, seated beside Gavin, watched Franklin approach the podium under glaring lights. His tie felt like a noose around his neck. He cleared his throat, tried to speak, but the hush in the room reminded him of that Sunday at Trinity Church. This was another congregation, expecting honesty and a path forward. He delivered a speech acknowledging the scandal's toll, but promising transparency, stronger corporate governance, and a renewed mission. Lucille observed carefully, noticing the cracks in his usually confident demeanor. The audience's reception was lukewarm at best, and soon an unexpected question from a shareholder would throw the meeting into chaos. A seasoned investor with thick glasses stood. "Mr. Rourke," he said, voice resonating in the ballroom, "why should we trust a man who paraded his indiscretions in a church, disrupted the sanctity of his marriage, and now stands accused of shady offshore dealings?" A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing every tense second. Franklin froze, the questions slicing him open publicly. Lucille found her heart pounding, empathizing with his plight even though she still felt betrayed. She locked eyes with Gavin, who urged her silently. Summoning courage, Lucille stood. "Our personal tragedies are real," she began, voice echoing, "but I can assure you, as co-founder of our philanthropic and financial arms, that every questionable dealing is under audit. We will rectify these mistakes." Her words cast a renewed light on the stage, and for a brief moment, the crowd's hostility softened. Karma, however, still loomed, awaiting its final strike. After the conference, investors huddled in tense side discussions. Some looked convinced by Lucille's sincerity, others remained skeptical, demanding more proof. Franklin, drenched in sweat, left the stage, feeling the weight of a near impossible redemption. As he made his way to Lucille, the hush between them spoke volumes. She regarded him coolly. "Don't think my support here changes anything," she said softly. "I did it for the employees and the charities, nothing more." Franklin nodded, lost for words. Unknown to them, Gavin and the company's legal team were finishing their audit. That very evening, Gavin discovered undeniable evidence that Franklin's personal accounts had been used in suspicious transactions, apparently orchestrated by unscrupulous partners. The culprit was close, but the responsibility lay squarely at Franklin's feet. Charges could follow. Franklin's downfall, it seemed, was accelerating. Karma's unstoppable tide was rising, about to deliver a dramatic finale none would forget. The next day, scandal news soared to a crescendo. An article revealed that the district attorney's office had opened a preliminary investigation into Franklin's finances. Phone calls bombarded the Rourke empire. Marriages can break, hearts can mend, but legal scrutiny threatens to dismantle everything. Even Lucille, though forging a path away from Franklin, felt the quake, since her philanthropic ventures shared corporate ties. Franklin staggered under the pressure. His phone beeped with a message from Marina. "You're shutting me out, and I'm about to give birth in a few months. Either commit to me fully, or I'll go public again, this time with proof of all your promises." He felt cornered. Publicly, he was despised. Legally, he was imperiled. Privately, he was torn between guilt for Lucille and responsibility for Marina's unborn child. His illusions lay in tatters. All that remained was the final wave of retribution, looming closer by the hour. A few days later, the city awoke to a new headline: arrest warrant issued for Franklin Rourke. The district attorney had found enough probable cause to charge him with financial misconduct. Stunned, Franklin waited anxiously in his office, his lawyers working frantically for a possible bail arrangement. Paparazzi and news crews swarmed outside. The vibrant city below looked merciless, a jungle ready to devour him. Lucille, from Harriet's living room, watched the televised news coverage in disbelief. She had known an investigation was looming, but never imagined it would escalate to an arrest warrant so swiftly. Guilt gnawed at her. Despite everything, she had loved Franklin. She considered calling him, but her pride and heartbreak held her back. By midday, Franklin surrendered himself at a police station, flanked by lawyers. The cameras captured every moment, the once celebrated millionaire stooping to face the law he had so recklessly tempted. Franklin's arraignment took place in a packed courtroom. The judge set an eye-watering bail, which he managed to pay thanks to his dwindling, yet still considerable funds. Emerging from the courthouse, Franklin faced a barrage of reporters. Questions about his pregnant mistress, his wife, and the offshore accounts pelted him like hail. Marina, watching from afar, felt a pang of concern. She texted him, "I'm here if you need me." But Franklin didn't reply. He couldn't. His world was collapsing, and he felt unmoored from all sides. Meanwhile, Lucille also watched, struggling with conflicting emotions: fear for him, resentment for his betrayal, sorrow for their shattered love. The city collectively held its breath for the next chapter. The man who once flaunted his prowess in a sacred church, humiliating his wife and shocking onlookers, now faced a heavier condemnation, the relentless hammer of justice. Time inched forward. As Franklin's trial date approached, the board voted to remove him as CEO, replacing him with Gavin. Bolstered by Lucille's continued presence and moral authority, Gavin managed to stabilize the firm's dealings. Slowly, some investors regained cautious trust, if not in Franklin, then in the new leadership. The philanthropic arms were spun off under Lucille's direction, preserving the charitable projects she championed. Marina, disillusioned by Franklin's silence, quietly sold her story rights to a publisher, planning a tell-all book that threatened further ruin for him. She felt betrayed by a man who once promised her a dazzling future. Her unborn child fluttered in her womb as she signed the contract, tears blurring her vision. In the final irony, Franklin found himself living alone in the hidden mansion, riddled with worry and self-pity, too proud to seek forgiveness from the wife he had so callously wronged. On the day of Franklin's sentencing, the courthouse brimmed with spectators. He pleaded guilty to lesser charges in a deal arranged by his legal team, narrowly avoiding a lengthy prison term but facing substantial fines, community service, and strict probation. His reputation lay in ruins. Outside the courthouse, a throng of reporters waited. Marina, conspicuously absent, had moved out of the mansion. She later gave birth to a baby girl without Franklin present. Lucille, though not required to attend, stood in the hallway, face solemn. As Franklin emerged in the hallway, their eyes locked. He approached, trembling slightly. "Lucille," he whispered, I know I don't deserve it, but forgive me?" She studied him, remembering the love they once shared. Finally, she replied, "I hope you find the strength to make amends first to yourself, then to others." Her tone was gentle, but held an unspoken finality. This was the end of their chapter. Life after the sentence was harsh for Franklin. He lost his fortune paying off legal penalties and investor settlements. His former mansion was sold. The hidden estate, once a symbol of extravagance, now sat empty. Divorced from Lucille, he found himself living in a modest apartment, performing mandated community service at a local shelter, a stark contrast to his Bentley-driven glory days. Yet, irony glimmered in the dusty corners of his newfound humility. The same church he once scandalized received him for weekly volunteer shifts, cleaning floors and helping arrange charity drives. Whenever members recognized him, they gave polite nods, some offered forgiveness, others wore thin smiles of pity. Lucille carried on with her philanthropic work, her grace applauded more than ever. Marina, forging her own path, raised her daughter quietly, occasionally sending Franklin photos but keeping her distance. The seeds of karmic retribution had sprouted their final fruit, leaving Franklin with regret and a slim chance for redemption. Weeks turned into months. Franklin walked to Trinity Church every Saturday morning, wearing casual clothes and humility like a cloak. He mopped floors, rearranged storage, and sometimes silently sat in a pew afterward, head bowed in reflection. The congregation that once witnessed his shocking display had moved on, though the memory remained a cautionary tale about pride and betrayal. One afternoon, as he scrubbed the church's wooden steps, he spotted Lucille across the street, helping distribute meals to the homeless. He paused, heart tugged by nostalgia and remorse. Her hair glowed in the sunlight, her posture exuding quiet determination. For a brief second, she glanced his way, their eyes meeting. She offered a nod, just enough to acknowledge his presence, then returned to her task. He sighed, returning to his own work. There was no grand reunion, no sudden absolution. Only the slow, steady march of consequences and a faint glimmer of self-improvement. Thank you for staying with us through this gripping tale of ambition, betrayal, and ultimately, the consequences of one's actions. Franklin's lavish displays and poor decisions led him down a harrowing path, while Lucille's unwavering composure and moral strength proved that integrity can triumph over scandal. Marina's role serves as a reminder that no one escapes the fallout of ill-considered choices. In the end, each character reaped what they sowed, highlighting that karmic justice does not discriminate. If you found this story captivating, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives. Together, let's explore life's complex lessons in every new story.